We'll have folks come to us, and it'll happen often with people in government jobs or state jobs, city jobs, and maybe they both do. Maybe they're both in law enforcement, or they're both teachers, or combination of the both, where there's state pensions, so forth. And they'll come to me and say, "Okay, we both have our pensions, we both have our deferred comp, and then we have on the side, 403b or 401k or whatever other asset that they can do on the side." And I've even seen people come to me after they have done their divorce through an attorney or on their own, and they came to me because they had to do the QDROs to divide the pensions. And I'll read their divorce decree, and they literally said all pensions essentially to be divided equally, which many times that doesn't make sense. It costs a fortune to do those. And so I will send them to an actuarial service. I didn't know CDFAs did that, but I would send them to an actuarial service. Say, the 401ks, I think they can figure out, look at the date of marriage, date of separation, look at the values, to get an estimate. But the true pension systems need to be evaluated, as you said. So that's surprising to me. I'm glad to learn that, because in some of these cases, we've been able to knock it down from maybe 6 QDROs to maybe 2 by, and then going back to being able to modify. So you said that people wish they knew before. We've gone in and modified these judgments that were submitted years ago to say, hey, now each spouse is keeping these two 100%, and these two are going to be used, and we will take the differences and we will kind of offset against each other, and then we'll determine how that needs to be split. But if they did that in advance, this is not a step they'd have to take and make all these changes. And that sounds like that's something you can do.
Yeah, and not all CDFAs do pension valuations, but
Okay.
They definitely can. And I run into that same scenario that you're mentioning, where they're like, oh, let's just split every single pension, every single account down the middle, which means a whole bunch of QDROs. And if you're not familiar with QDROs, it's the legal document. Not you, but your listeners, the legal document that is used to facilitate the split. So I have even like attorneys will tell the clients, oh, let's just split all these things. And I'm like, okay, this is what that actually means. You're going to have like 6 of these QDRO documents drawn up. It's going to cost probably at least $500 each. And then you have to actually do all the things to get the QDRO processed, which takes several months. It's a giant pain, where if you do a little bit of math up front and you have someone like me help with the math, we can say, okay, this pension is worth, let's say, $100,000. Mm-hmm. This pension is worth $50,000. This 401k is worth $50,000. Instead of splitting every single one, you take the $100,000 pension, I'll take the $50,000 pension, and the $50,000 in 401k or whatever. You can come up with different combinations to get to the same end result. Because really, at the end of the day, you care about how much money is each person receiving. It doesn't necessarily matter as much like which specific pieces. I mean, the pieces matter, but you can strategize in a way to minimize the work that needs to be done to split those things.
Yeah. We've had, like you mentioned, it's coming from attorneys making that recommendation. We'll have folks come into us usually because they feel that they've read online that all community properties divide 50-50. They assume they have to do that and divide 50-50. So we'll have someone come in and they'll have maybe some small, 401ks, maybe $5,000-$6,000, and they'll have several of them. And on their agreement that they came up with, that they typed up on a Word doc, literally said they're going to split all these. And I said, this is crazy, because you're going to lose the value of one in the cost of QDROs doing this. And I asked, why did you guys decide to do this? And they said, because it says community property needs to be divided equally. So I don't give them financial advice, obviously, but that's when I talk to them about, hey, you can keep that and keep this, at a very high level. You keep these 3, you keep those 2. That's a wash. Now we have this one we're dealing with. And, the only thing I'm not aware of is when it comes to pensions, true pension systems, where it's a percentage at retirement, and some of them have and I don't know what you would call it. Like if the spouse with the pension were to die, their spouse can get it continually. So that's where that can get tricky to say, would I let my spouse keep this pension 100% and I keep mine? But there's also some of the, depending on the type of pension, they have some post-death benefit. Is that something that you obviously evaluate.
Yeah. So, for example, so I live near Sacramento, and so there's a ton of state workers that work for the Capitol, and so I deal with a lot of their benefits, the government benefits. There's usually pensions involved in those,
Right.
and oh my gosh, where was I going with that?
We were talking about post-death benefits and
Thank you.
Usually I forget.
So you have different options usually. So for example, if you work for the state and you're splitting up a pension in a divorce, you can choose to, let's say my spouse works for the state, and I can choose, do I want to just wait until he retires and then I'll receive 50% of his payment, and I get that payment as long as he's getting that payment. So like essentially I'm tied to him. Like my income starts when his does. I'm kind of dependent on him for that income because he controls when he starts it. Or we can create this separate account. It's called the segregated method, where they create the separate account now. They move my credits over, and then I decide when I start my payments. It's based on my lifetime. I get to designate, a beneficiary or whatever. You've got some different options available to you. And I would imagine that this is going to vary across different organizations, but like you want to make sure that you understand how that works. Like, who decides when you start it? And what happens if your spouse dies? What happens if you die? You get to designate beneficiaries. You need to figure out all that stuff because that matters a lot.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, because usually, and I'm glad to again talk to you about these things, because generally when people have these questions, or even when they don't, I'll let them know there's different ways this can be done, because it should be, they don't have to decide that in the divorce settlement. They don't have to decide at that point how they want to have that distributed or assigned to them. But they do, during the QDRO process, need to make that determination, because the language of the QDRO is different depending on their decision on that.
Yeah, and it's complicated. And I have read those same 200-page documents, and they don't make it easy to figure this out on your own.
Right.
Wrong can be, it can be costly for you.